Welcome everyone to Terra Confluence 2024. Today, we at the Global Climate Association are delighted to welcome Dr. Molly Keehn, EED. She is the co-founder of Cojourn and a passionate advocate for personal growth and social change to our Terra Torrent a dialogue series. So, welcome, Molly. Now,
Thank
Dr. Keehn also serves as a visiting lecturer in the Intergroup Dialogue program at Mount Holyoke College. Her extensive experience as an educator and consultant in diversity, equity, and inclusion enriches her approach to fostering understanding across differences, particularly in addressing societal challenges such as racism, classism, and sexism. All of this is very appropriate to our discussion related to climate change and adaptation and resilience topics. Dr. Keehn holds a doctorate in education from the in the field of education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, focusing on connection, vulnerability, and personal storytelling. Her academic and professional achievements have had a profound impact on educational practices and personal development initiatives. We are excited to have Dr. Keehn share insights on how structured, goal oriented programs like Cojourn can drive meaningful change in climate action narratives and foster a kinder, more connected world. So, we are extremely delighted to have Dr. Keehn on board with us today. Welcome, Molly.
thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And so today for our theme of discussion, the first question that I want to open it to you is about the operational framework of Cojourn. So what is Cojourn? Could you
Mm.
explain how Cojourn's interactive framework facilitates personal growth and goal achievement, particularly in the context of environmental sustainability and climate action? So if you could throw some light on that, you're very good to.
Absolutely, yes. And I think, well, first, before I even start there, I just want to name that I am, and my expertise is in the Cojourn model and in social justice education. And I am very new to climate change work. And so I enter this conversation with a lot of humility, and I've been learning and growing a whole lot in this area and really excited about, I know all of those different pieces are interconnected. So really excited to get a chance to have a conversation with you, bringing in all of your incredible expertise
We are on.
in thinking about climate change. So I did prepare a few slides to explain what Cojourn is, just a little bit about the framework, and then also the climate action application, which we'll be talking about today. So I'm just going to pull those up. Here we go, slideshow. Can you see those again?
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, so what is Cojourn? So Cojourn is a research-backed program for compassionate, judgment-free accountability partnerships designed to offer more connection and mutual support as we strive to create meaningful movement in our life. So it helps you reflect on your goals, identify necessary steps to move forward, and set up a structure for sustainable follow-through. So really, we help create accountability partnerships. We're pairing people together to work toward a goal using a framework backed in research. And so there are 6 steps to how a Cojourn program will work. You first partner with somebody. And so depending on the program, either people choose their own partner or we pair people together. You set your path, so you develop an overall guiding theme related to an area that you want to pay attention to. You make a commitment to yourself and your partner to meet every week for about 30 minutes to put attention on this area that you're working to. You apply what we call the formula. And so we have 8 core components of Cojourn, which are the research-backed pieces that make it work and that are key to sustainable accountability partnerships. And so then each week when you meet with your partner, you create weekly milestones. And so that's 3 to 5 smaller goals or intentions related to your guiding theme that keep you moving in the direction. And then each week you have a chance to reflect and repeat. And so you get to learn from your partner and yourself, come back to your notes, and keep working in an ongoing process. So it gives a chance for some ongoing self-reflection. And, we've had individual Cojourn participants since we created the model about 11 years ago in 48 countries and 43 states in the US. And, the 8 core components, they're pieces like peer support. So you support your partner rather than having to coach them or advise them. Confidentiality. You practice active listening, which is such a core and critical skill. You practice celebrating small wins, holding mutual accountability, a self-compassionate approach. And I'll say more about that later as we talk through the different questions, but really practicing being kind to yourself and non-judgmental if you don't succeed in your goals. You really make the commitment to both to yourself and your partner who's counting on you. And then you choose one area of focus. And so, just to give a little context, back in 2019, we released a book about the Cojourn model. And this is a picture with 3 of our book contributors, but we had about 10 different people sharing about how they used the general Cojourn model. And then we developed a number of different organizational programs. And so some of them were based in well-being. We created a racial justice model in the summer of 2020, which I'll say I co-created that with a team of experts in social justice education. And it was a 3-month, 12-week cohort experience for organizations who want to help people live more into their organizational values related to diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion. And so the reason I'm mentioning is because about a year ago, I was approached by a couple of people at a local university and a local climate activist who said, Molly, this model works. It helps move people. Why not apply it to the critical issue or a critical issue of our time, which is climate change? And so from that, we created a Cojourn for Climate Action program. And so that looks like it's a 12-week Cojourn program with a climate action focus. We offer partner matching, and we have a number of different resources, a Cojourn guidebook, a climate action resource packet, and goal tracking spreadsheet. We host different large group check-ins where people can share what they're working on, and then weekly emails for support through the 12 weeks. And, before we even launched it, I tested it last spring and made my own climate actions as I was trying to learn more about the topic and feel like I at least knew enough to be able to work on this program. And this is a picture of me with my father we watched a documentary about climate change together. And also we're discussing the climate book by Greta Thunberg, but really getting a chance to bring in some family thinking about the topic as well. And then I want to say I brought together a team of folks who have expertise in climate change and climate action and interest. Some were former students that I worked with at Mount Holyoke College who helped develop the program for this pilot that we're in the process of running right now, of which you are a participant. So I'm sure as we move through, I'll invite you to share anything about that. And then I think I'll end with just saying some of the benefits of a general Cojourn, right, are a deeper connection with somebody, more follow through on whatever it is that you want to work on, but the gift of space each week to say, am I headed in the direction I want to go? Learning from your partner, exchange of wisdom, being lifted through supporting someone else, a chance to practice the core program skills, and then a record at the end of habits, patterns, and discoveries. And so I think I will stop there, and then I can speak to some of the other pieces in another question.
So that was a lovely presentation of what that means, the work that you do. And in today's time and date, but even though there's globalization, everybody is connected to everyone, there's a disconnect. There's people running towards their goal and then falling short. Mental stresses, inequity in all terms is like affecting them, affecting the need for getting up there for success. People need to be successful so much more when in these times there is constant pressure, people watching us. So a partnership such as these can not just work for our personal development, personal growth, but also in terms of career, finding a tribe or sort of your soul tribe beyond your own maybe perhaps community, state, or even country. You can find someone who thinks like you across the oceans. So this is
Mhm.
a wonderful path that you are leading people towards, with the and creating a more kinder group of people. That is, which is something very important. So
Hmm.
on that note, I'll move on to the next question of mine. That is, can you discuss how your research into connection, vulnerability, and personal storytelling can enhance understanding across differences in the context of climate change? Because climate change is a lot about, there is indifference about who gets affected. The
Mhm.
vulnerability is not homogeneous across communities. It is very, there's so much more divide. And how can you relate that into your research, and how can your research help with something as huge as climate change?
Mhm. That's such a powerful and important question. And I can't say that I have like a definite answer to that, but and I have ideas, right? Because where some of this application to climate change is so new for me. And, my research was on the role of personal storytelling and learning in two different types of social justice classes, looking specifically around race and racism, right? And so I looked at both white students in the US context and students of color, and what they learned from listening to stories. And the one of the key findings was the value of connection and what happens in the brain when we are embodied with another person listening to their story. This was all before courses were online, so I was studying people physically in a room together, and how some of the neuroscience of when I hear a story from someone, the same parts of my brain light up as if I was experiencing what happened, right? And it increases empathy and likeliness to act. And data can be effective as well. However, in terms of that personalizing experience and really hitting people in the heart, in a different way, listening to and sharing stories can be a really powerful way. And there's a really important piece of reciprocity, right? And so, like you named, it's important to think about, in the context of what I was studying in race and racism, it's important that it's not just white students who in the US are from the privileged identity who are not actively experiencing racism or systemic racism. And to not just listen to the stories of other students of color, right? And not having to give anything themselves. It really is about everybody sharing about what it is like to live. I would share in those spaces what it's like to live as a white person in the United States. And also other identities that I hold, that in a way that for me is as feels as vulnerable in the moment. So there really is, and it's tricky. There's no perfect way to do this, right? And there's places, but the key is not to have the education be at the expense of the people who are already impacted. And so I think thinking about that in the context of climate change, right, is a really important piece. Vulnerability looks different for people. In my work, I drew a lot on the work of Brene Brown, social worker, in the US, who really, I just jotted down, she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and says, vulnerability is not weakness. It's actually our most accurate measure of courage. And so the reciprocity of vulnerability, of not being certain about what you're saying, right? Of showing a little bit more of yourself than maybe, can be really powerful for connecting people to each other, and also to the critical issues of our time.
So bring in a very valid point that like it should not be just information we are imparting to others, which is like scientific information cut and dry. If there's a personal element added to anything, any information, that will make the other person understand it so much more, and they'll open up their vulnerabilities to that. There is also a term which is climate vulnerability, who all are vulnerable to situations that are impacting them say a community living on the coast, exact on the coast of a um, maybe any place which is often there is a cyclone. So those are those vulnerable groups. So their
Mm,
stories might not relate to a person who's living in landlocked areas, but they have their own issues. But in the form of storytellings, which I had earlier had a like a opportunity to listen to some of the Native Americans oration in a one of the conferences where they said the information to about their vulnerabilities that they had, disasters that they had faced in the past, and how they overcome that. That information passed on throughout the generation in form of what they call as oration, narration, or storytelling. So stories are people remember stories, connect to them, and this is a powerful way of dissemination of information. And if it is done in case of not just climate change, but any issue that might be more relevant to people than just a set of statistics that 5,000 people from this particular community were they were exposed to this issue. Instead of that, if there's a personal element that brings in the information more closer to people's heart. So
mhm.
on that note, I would like to move on to the next question that is on maybe we talked about personal storytelling on environmental awareness. We just discussed that. Do you want to say something on that also?
Well, I think, yeah, and I appreciate, I want to say that you named the different meanings of vulnerability, right? And thinking about what it means in terms of to live, like in terms of thinking about climate change in other places. And I haven't personally done research on the impact of personal storytelling on raising environmental awareness. And I have a feeling I would predict that having a chance, particularly for those, like I think about where I live in Western Massachusetts, right? We're starting to see some impacts of climate change, but there's nothing like the destruction that other places of the world are experiencing. And so it's important for me to hear those stories and listen and use that as fodder to take action, right? And to get out of my own comfort zone when I am not currently being impacted. I know my well, one of the Cojourn program coordinators, facilitators who's been really involved and helped create this program, she had a family member whose house burned down in Maui with the wildfires that happened in Hawaii, and it was really close to home for her. It was a family member, and as her beloved friend and colleague, who I mean, she's my beloved friend and colleague. I care deeply about her and her family. It hit me in a different way than just reading the news. That I also have a cousin in Australia who, with the wildfires there a couple of years ago, like those places where we have these relationships, I think can help shift understanding and willingness, right, to for me to get out of my bubble even more and act and see the critical importance, right, that we all get involved now. Or
That is true. Like when you say we every day we hear thousands of people are dying or vulnerable or something bad happened to them. It happens in the news broadcast and it does not hit us. But even if I hear of one personal close uh, family member or maybe a relative or friend suffering or dying, that will hit us so much more because we have that personal connection. So
Mhm,
slowly, what we have to do maybe for this storytelling to have an environmental awareness, for that, maybe we build those connection. Like I am talking to you, and then you have a connection. So we create a global bond between everyone, and then we are as a when we have that personal connection with everyone on this planet. Each of the planet member is a friend of mine, a family of mine. When we start believing that, I feel there will be change. There's something known as in Sanskrit, there's a term which is called Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which means the Vasudev means the earth, Kutumbakam, Kutum means family or kin. So entire world is our family. So that
mm,
personal thing we have to inculcate in within ourselves to have those connections. So we can
mm,
relate to these problems. Maybe me being in India, I am not able to understand how wildfires are affecting them. I can understand how storms or maybe floods or something will affect me more, but we can have that kinship between us. So
Mhm. Mm.
on that note, I would like to go on to the next part, offering hope. So, how do you find hope in the midst of climate crisis and the other challenges that is happening in and around us? And
Mm.
how do you suggest offering it to others?
Mm. It's such an important question. And I think I can speak about me personally. I feel hope when I'm doing something, when I'm involved in part of the solution in some way. And so if I start to feel hopeless, sometimes it's that I need to take a rest if I can, right? Take a break and be like, okay, I'm just feeling discouraged and hopeless right now. What do I need to get myself back to, be able to keep holding the perspective that change is possible and I get to be part of that. I've always been, I'm just pulling up the quote, one quote that from Greta Thunberg, which really hit me when I heard it in her TED Talk a number of years ago, who said, once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action, then and only then hope will come. Um, and, knowing that at least, in the US, the news is, they really want the headlines. They emphasize the negative, right? Of the destruction and so really for me trying to seek out to need to know what is not going well. And there's a lot that's not going well. So it's not about ignoring what isn't, but also making sure I put attention on the actions people are taking. Um, the the things that are happening, the changes that are, and to see how I can be a part of augmenting them and keeping things going. Um, just hearing about the incredible week of events that you're planning through Global Climate Association filled me with hope and excitement to hear about all of the things that you're putting out that I can attend, that I can spread the word about, that I can share, seeing the brilliance of others, and the courage and putting themselves out there and doing things, that brings me so much hope. And then working with young people, teaching students at Mount Holyoke College, and their brilliance and their courage and their tenacity. And, that really keeps me feeling hopeful. I think the last thing I'll say is I think it's important with other people is to get a chance to allow people to feel their discouragement and despair. And, like sit with people, have that big cry, right? Of like, I can't believe this is happening. And I really feel like when we can feel those hard feelings, that can help instill, to release them in the moment, to be able to have our minds be able to move toward hope. So sometimes if I start feeling hopeless, I realize I just need to like feel my heart break a little bit and not skip over that to continue.
That is absolutely true that we need to make ourselves also vulnerable to the situation and accept sometimes the truth as it is. And we can find hope in action. And I am like, I have told you this in person before. I'll tell it on this platform as well. When this Cojourn for climate action was launched, I started off with being a little bit of skeptical that how can I make my passion or work, the things that I'm working on climate education, climate literacy, environmental education, and bring it to action. And then when we started working with a partner, so I made myself vulnerable to a partner, told her my story, she shared mine, and then we went on to co-plan. So this is that the Cojourn climate action. The series is going on right now, so I'm still a participant 4 weeks down to the finish line, but I planned on having this event, Terra Confluence 2024. Within this time period, planned it, started off doing work about it, and then went through with it because I had that accountability, a support of a friend who's like maybe from a different part of the world altogether, from Europe, where she is from, and then her guidance, her support, and then everything together brought hope. And You will, I don't know if you have heard that term, there's something called climate doomerism. So people climate doomerism, and there are climate deniers who say nothing is happening. Climate doomerism is something to explain that people, when uh, what people they think about this is nothing can be done about the climate. We are going to be destroyed. So when that mindset sits in a person's mind, you cannot really act. But when we try to find hope, when we try to take one step towards action, when you will find so many people walking maybe in different parts, different hidden in corners of the world, and we can bring their experience, bring their work together. Like say how your program, you might not think you know much about climate change, but something that you are doing, setting goals, accountability, peer support, being kind, being hopeful, that how can that be used inside our systems to make our program, or make our whatever our mission is true. So that is like the Cojourn has given me that hope, and I'm very ever grateful for that. So moving on to the question about burnouts. So what practices do you recommend for cultivating attention to the climate crisis while preventing burnout, especially in educational settings, those people
Mhm.
who are in those settings?
I wanted to ask about the educational settings. Are there any in particular that you're thinking about, like for students or for teachers or for younger or college or any setting?
Anybody who's working in the field, maybe in my context, I have studied about climate change and from like undergrad level, so we know that okay, we understand the complexity of the things, we are not completely closed our eyes to it. So maybe
Hmm.
imagine a little child is studying that in their curriculum in school, and they see that again this is happening, and they want to take a action, they grow up to be go into that particular field. So someone, for someone like that, what would you suggest from different age groups they might be in?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would recommend practices of the biggest one, and this is where my interest in Cojourn comes in, is about being in connection with others, right? And we know worldwide, a lot of the research that I talk about is US based, but there's an epidemic of loneliness.
Hmm.
And in the United States before the COVID pandemic, over 60% of Americans reported being really lonely and isolated. And that number has increased, and it's over 80% for young people 18 to 24. And so, thinking about in educational settings, the importance of having relationships with people with whom to connect, right? To say I'm feeling a lot of despair and discouragement about what's happening around me, or to celebrate, like I just did something courageous, like, and to cheer each other on. And so, in terms of thinking about burnout, I think of getting people around us, right? To help lift us in the hard places and to celebrate those, whether it's a Cojourn accountability partnership, being part of a group that meets regularly, having friends or family members that you talk to about it. I think that seems like a really important part that has a lot of protective factors for our mental health and also our physical health. One study I always like to share is that they found that the impact on the physical health of feeling lonely is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of our lifespan, right? And so it's such a critical piece for well-being in general and specifically connected to important issues. Another piece is just remembering it's a marathon, right? And not a sprint. And sometimes we need to take a couple days and like rest, read a novel, spend time with friends, play, laugh, do all those things we need as humans to be able to sustain, you know, focus and attention and work on critical areas. And then also, I think finding joy and finding our place in this movement, which there are so many things that need to be done, and there's room for so many different kinds of people, right? Some people are speakers and are out front at a protest and doing things. Other people are more behind the scenes, driving people, cooking for folks. It's all critical. Educating young people, supporting young people. Like there's so infinite numbers. So I am trying to figure out like my place where it feels sustainable and it feels like it's using my gifts in the best way. Um, one little example, and it's a small thing, but in the US, there's an election coming up in November. And I'm really looking at candidates for what is the impact on climate change if they get elected, right? And thinking about environmental impact. And I'm starting this Sunday, one of my personal Cojourn goals was to gather people at my house, make a big soup for everyone, and join in on one of the big letter campaigns that you can do in the United States. So I have a goal of sending out 1,000 letters to encourage young voters to get out and vote, right? And there's some research that shows this is an effective method. So we're connected to a program, but I'm having people come over to connect with each other, eat soup, share what they're doing around climate action. So places to get more involved. And to me, this feels very joyful and easeful, yet the impact, I can easily sustain that, right? And the impact is gathering. I've heard now from, I think, over 20 people who are starting to plan to come, right? And getting more people involved and hooked in different ways and getting to learn about more ways I can hook in. And so, in terms of burnout, if it was a different form of action that didn't feel joyful or connected to me, I might not do it or sustain. I mean, I'll have to check in with you in November to tell you if I actually did succeed in getting, all these letters written and all these people together. But it's a small example, but to me it's meaningful and it feels important for me to keep looking for those types of opportunities specifically related to more systemic change, like who is elected and the impact of that.
That is actually a very big, I mean, like in terms of if you understand, it's a big goal and it is effective because you are connected to that and you are doing what you love to make that happen. Even though it might feel small to you, but any difference made is a difference. And
Hmm.
collective over for the all the people that are there all over the world, everyone, if they make whatever difference they can in their own way, it will have a positive impact on the entire globe. So
What is your thinking on preventing burnout as someone who actually, is working in this field and probably sees it firsthand way more than I do?
I feel it more. I mean, like I have felt have been years where I have been seeing this is happening, burning things, people, and I am also more motivated not just for climate, but the violence towards animal that hurts me extremely. That makes me not just makes me sad. It makes me extremely angry. I want to just go and do something violent also. So those things are very difficult to deal with, and when you are in that zone it's come problematic to come out thinking that okay, you have all this knowledge, you have all these degrees, you have these papers that you have written and you are teaching people, so what difference can you make? But these actions such as these talk, we are creating such informational events for other people to understand, to connect, and then that gives me a sense of hope when that will when I come back and think about it, then I can understand okay, that is something that is good that is happening. So you will not feel the effect of the burnout as much when we are middle of having so much going on in our mind itself. Small actions perhaps. I sometimes cannot convince myself my small actions are good enough, but in
Mm,
days that are good, that makes me feel nice. Okay, I did something. People actually, if you keep doing what you are doing for a good cause, even though you will not have supporters or maybe you will have criticism from everywhere, but at the end of the line, someone will come to you after maybe many years and say, okay, you did something, I remember it, and that was a nice thing. So that has happened to me in context of something as simple as feeding. I used to feed, we had a lot of stray puppies in our university campus, in all the university campuses we stayed. So somebody had to feed them. They had no means like way of surviving. So there were a lot of people saying, why are you doing this? They are making a nuisance. They are making the place dirty and all that, whatever. But after some years, somebody came and told me this in that context. Same is for climate change also. That work that I'm doing now, people would like dismiss it beforehand, but now that we have like a whole bunch of international team walking all over the world to make these events such as these happen, where we are discussing on something very simple as being kind, being bringing hope, bringing like not just the science and number crunching. It is something which is very personal. And every talk I had from the last couple of weeks when I have been recording this session, everyone has said that there's a need of like there's a disconnect, and then we need to have more people who are kinder towards the planet, towards the cause, and then that gives me hope that prevents the burnout.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. That's wonderful. And when you were just talking, I was thinking about this quote that I love from Celeste Ng, the author. She says, "It's easy to feel helpless, like you can't fight the tide. But remember, small actions can have a huge impact, and one person like you can inspire others to act." And it's so interesting to reflect on you saying you think you're doing small small actions and the amount of inspiration it gives me to see what you're doing, which feels huge and has impact worldwide, right? And I think if we all put that mirror back on ourselves when we're trying to do these small pieces, it can really amplify each other's and really increase the impact of all of us when we don't feel alone or we have other people cheering us on or reflecting back the reality that maybe we're not able to notice or see inside. So,
That is where the partnership comes in probably. So when there's the other person can think your successes are much more than you yourself will, so they are there to remind you, and it's vice versa. And if we start doing it in terms of a group and maybe communities, then we'll have much, I think, manifold positive impacts than we are having right now when we remove that loneliness factor from our equation.
and one last thing I want to say that might speak to a different question, but it's popping in right now. One of my favorite recent books related to the topic of social justice is by the author Sean Ginwright, who's based in California. And his book is called The Four Pivots: Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves. Highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. In the book, he talks about four pivots, changes we need to make in our process or way of doing things to reorient toward justice. That's my very simplified way of saying it. But one of the four pivots is moving from transactional to transformative relationships with people. And I think some of what you were saying, right? There's transactional relationships where maybe I read a LinkedIn thing that you posted or somebody else did, or a Facebook post, but I don't know you. I don't get to hear your story. I don't get to sit down, have a conversation, partner, show my vulnerability, hear and versus these transformative, which can, feels like it's becoming more and more rare to have those opportunities and the time to sit. This is connected to some of the intergroup dialogue work I do, where we sit in a circle with others and have like a little bit of time to get to know each other and to talk about things that matter and to critically examine them with curiosity rather than just really quick sound bites and treating somebody else as an object, rather seeing their full humanity and the complexities involved in that. And so I think, some of what you were saying about the loneliness piece and connected also feel and being kinder, right? It's treating people in transformative ways and expecting and being treated in that way rather than in a more transactional way.
That is absolutely correct. And it does not just mean to one-on-one in person or a human. If we treat nature or the entire climate or the ecosystem in the same way, that not just it's a give and take, we are getting something from it, but as a living system, the entire
Mm.
ecosystems and the climate and the environment, we should treat them as independent entities who have the life of their own. Then maybe we can more relate to the destruction that is happening to them instead of the like maybe the people who are living in there, just not the humans or the animals that are dying, but the due to the fires, the entire like thousands of years and millions of years, what was built there, that was destroyed due to the fire. So it was not just human lives or creatures' lives that was gone. It was so much more history into that nature that also was lost during those fires. So that is something to think about, maybe. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. What a powerful and important piece to, yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
just it came to into my mind because you said those, that transactional to transformative relationship. This is beautiful.
Right.
So,
Mm.
moving on to the last parts of our questions that we have, we what mechanism does Cojourn employ to foster lasting behavioral changes among its participants? Especially, it can be regarding sustainability practices. So we just
Mm.
don't start something and stop it after the program is over, or maybe something like that.
Hmm. Well, so our hope, right? Because Cojourn is so self-directed that people sign up, they get this partner, they start working toward this goal. And our hope is that they see the value or experience the value of being connected and checking in with people, and that they continue to employ that in their life in some way. With our graduate school programs, 90% of the participants say that they continue to meet with their partner or use the framework with somebody else, after the program is over, so that people kind of see the value, make it work for them, either keep meeting or find someone else to meet with, or a different way to set up that connection and accountability outside of Cojourn. Um, the other hope, I had mentioned the core components of Cojourn, and there are a couple that, one is celebrating each small success, right? And we talk a lot about the negativity bias in the brain, where we are kind of wired to pay 5 times more attention to what didn't go well than what does. And so I always talk about it with feedback on teaching evaluations, right? If I get 29, Molly is wonderful, best class I've ever taken. And then the one, I found her to be boring and talk, whatever. My brain does not remember all the positive ones,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that one negative one. And so, Cojourn, the goal is to help train our brains to start to notice and celebrate those little things that we do or that do go well, in order to offset some of our wiring around the negativity bias in the brain. And there's research that shows when we do that, it keeps us motivated and keeps us sustaining our efforts, rather than if we only notice what didn't go well. On the contrast, the other core component of Cojourn that really impacts people is the focus on self-compassion and non-judgment, both with ourselves and our partner. And so there's a lot of research. We draw on Dr. Kristen Neff's work, but there's more and more and more researchers in neuroscience are looking at what happens in the brain when we treat ourselves kindly, when we don't achieve our goal, or things don't go as we want them to, rather than beating ourselves up. And for me, I was raised, in the society around me where the norm was to really be harsh with myself. But there's research that shows when we do that, it increases cortisol, the stress hormone. It makes us way less likely to be able to follow through long term on what we want to do. If we're kind to ourselves, say like, wow, Molly, you didn't do that. It was a hard week. You're human. This happens. I'm way more likely to get back up and try again, and to be able to have the sort of impact that I want to have. So I think our hope with Cojourn is that we're training people on the value of having this connection and accountability, and some of these core skills that can help support ongoing work, to not have people get too burned out and stop, or to kind of use the pieces of neuroscience that we know from the brain that keeps us going and moving and working toward our goals.
I think in that context, I would like to say that practice makes perfect. So if we keep practicing it, then it'll be in our system. But if we stop, we might remember that, okay, that worked for me, but we could not really connect to that part of it. So we have to keep
Uh-huh.
practicing what we are doing to make it more effective.
Yes, and as one of our participants, right, who's doing the climate action program, I'm curious, what's your thinking about Cojourn and the behavioral change specifically related to sustainability? Do you have any thoughts based on?
Currently, because I am within the participation, like the process, I am working on the weekly goals. I have told you this, it has worked very well for me because I am able to account myself. I have this thing, okay, I have to do this, and I have talked to a person is holding me accountable, and then
Mm,
I need to follow through. And it has worked wonders. It has made me very much positive to what my goals are, seeing other people. I'm finding more hope. What Greta's quote said, that you will find hope when you take action. So I took action. I planned an event, and then I called in people from all across the world. People responded positively, and then we were like doing the process. So the hope came in, and the action is going on, and I'm completely busy, and I'm not thinking about negatives. I'm not thinking about what is happening, only that what am I doing. So I think that also is necessary to have a focus on your work. Okay, that you are tackling this part, you do your job, and then the other things will fall through. Let others do theirs. So there's that, and yes, I think it will. If I keep doing this, not just for me, the other people also I'm encouraging to. This will have a huge impact on
mm,
sustainability practices, because when I was planning this event, I had so much more things going on. I had to think of themes that on what people could work on. How would they use that? So I have started adapting them myself also, because as a person, even though you are an expert on a certain field, maybe I'm on climate and maybe disasters or anything, but I cannot just like do everything according to that goal. It's itself, unless I'm very much motivated or sort of have a huge sort of activism going inside of me, which it doesn't. I'll consider myself as a very normal person, and I can just get swayed in by different things. So having
mm,
these goals and having look into these partnerships among just not me and my partner, but the entire program, and maybe other people across the world, has brought that accountability in me, and that maybe I'll be much more sustainable in the coming future, which I would be
mm.
able to tell you in the next year, perhaps, that how is how the journey has been for me. But for now, it is spot on. It is working really absolutely great for me.
Mhm.
So, moving on to the last couple of questions that I'll go through. Uh, how are educational components integrated into Cojourn to enhance participants' understanding of climate issues, maybe, and effective response strategies? It not might not be just for climate, but you can just talk about your own program if there are educational components incorporated in Cojourn's. Uh,
Yes, that's a great question because Cojourn is a model we always say of how to do something. So we have the structure and the method for pairing people to move toward a goal, but usually the what is up to the participants, right? And so they decide what they want to work on, they develop their goals and move toward it. When we've started these applications towards critical issues like Cojourn for racial justice, Cojourn for climate action, we realized some people coming in might not quite know what they want to work on, or they might be newer. Some people might be coming in and know exactly what they need to or want to work on. So we try to have like a number of examples of ways that people could work on it, guiding themes they might make, related, let's say, for climate action. Um, and we've created a resource packet for each topic specific. And that was where, we hired someone to help Cojourn who does have a lot of expertise in climate justice work specifically. And they worked on creating, trying not to make it too overwhelming, but some great free online resources for education, for advocacy, for action, for accessing in the US Indigenous based knowledge and actions that they can take, trying to highlight the voices of marginalized people in the United States who are currently impacted by climate change, right? And what directing people of here's where to focus some of your time and energy, and here's things to get involved in. And so we're not telling people they have to do that, right? But we're trying to give people a menu of places to plug in if they're unsure. And then in each weekly email, we have a optional Cojourn for Climate Action goal, which I've been creating. I'm trying to alternate each week, sort of individual level, like think about what you're eating and move toward more of a plant-based diet. And then the next week, thinking about more systemic level change, like getting involved in thinking about upcoming elections or thinking about banking and where your money is, and is the bank funding the fossil fuel industry, or are they, and how can you shift your money? And so it's trying to have little ways, after this 12 weeks I'll get feedback on those, right, and rewrite them, and also think, some of those actions are more US based, and knowing we have participants, a couple at least, yourself included, from outside the United States. I really want to think about how to create those so that they can be relevant to anywhere in the world.
That is very true, because if you divide, especially if you not just tell them you have to work on climate change and this is, you have to take action, it becomes overwhelming which way to turn. But if they are focused towards a specific guiding theme, like my guiding theme is climate crisis, and to spread awareness about that. So I know, okay, this is my focus. I will not go towards climate advocacy. I might look into it, but my focus is this, and to
Mhm,
stay on that track. And this works for all sorts of sustainability practices working towards for conservation or restoration or climate change, because everybody have their own strengths and weaknesses and they can choose. So even
mhm,
it's for for the audiences, I want to say that if you want to do something for the earth and you do not know what it is, like you want to be more sustainable, then think what you are best at, and in that way how can you contribute, and just take that small niche and then just follow your passion and help it that way, and then be comforted, be happy that okay, I did that. And that would be enough also. So it will prevent burnout. You need not to change the entire world to make a difference. You can just do something around your corner of the world, and that will help also. So if everybody starts realizing that, but yes, that is not just for one person to take action, like maybe millions of people, if they think about that, out of the billions that we already have, we will go towards a positive direction. I feel that.
mhm. Beautiful. So wise. Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
So, thank you. So, moving on to the last, some of the questions that I have for you is about the diverse cultural context, which you already told right now, something you just we discussed. And how does Cojourn adapt its program to cater to diverse cultural context? And if you have not been doing it so far, do you have any plans? Because now that you have a people across the world and they are looking towards you for you to lead them towards taking global climate action. So for Cojourn for climate action program, so what would your ideas be on that?
Well, I think, what I love about working with Cojourn is that I never do it alone. So I always have a collaborator or collaborators to bring in thinking, right? And it makes the whole piece way more joyful for me because I love working with other people. And so I think, in terms of the question about diverse cultural contexts, and I would definitely want to partner with folks from different places around the world who, if we're either focusing or doing, let's say we were to do it in India, right? Just to have a specific place, I would definitely want to partner with someone who's living there, understands the cultural context in a way that I can't, and also collect ongoing feedback and thinking and try to, because I feel pretty clear from our research that the actual model and the structure works. And we've had participants, as I said, in 48 countries. It seems to work across many contexts. We translated our materials, our guidebook and slides into Spanish. We were getting ready to work with a university in Mexico. So that was an exciting place. So language wise, to have it be more accessible in more places. And we kind of have that ready to go. But the application, they're tweaks, right? Like I said, these weekly emails that are coming out, A, are in English, B, some of the actions are focused more from a US centric lens. And
True.
so that's the places where, would love collaboration, teaming up. If anyone listening to this video is like, I want to do that, or if always welcome people
Yes.
to, come in and think together. I think there's a lot of potential for application for this model and to help harness all of us, thinking and bringing our own special offering to this
Mm.
critical issue of our time. And so I'm eager to work with people and to think about it. And I know enough to know I do not have that just in myself to be able to do it alone. So,
Yes. That is completely true. When we work together, we have our own special powers and that we can make so much more difference. And then that is very well put that what you have said right now. And uh, I would go to the last couple of questions. That is one of them is about the policies and how can participants use Cojourn as a platform to engage in policy advocacy for stronger climate actions and sustainable practices? Because that is something which is your personal goal also you discussed right now. So could you say something about that? About
mhm.
policies and making changes by electoral pushing towards a more candidates who are willing to take action for the climate.
Mhm. I mean, I think there's a number of ways. The biggest thing I think is that doing anything, whether it's policy advocacy, whether it's education, in little bite-sized chunks, right? And so it might be one week, I might research what are some of the organizations locally involved in policy advocacy, right? That might be my goal, just to spend an hour Googling, right? And reading and learning. The next week, it might be like, okay, I'm going to reach out to three of the contact emails and find out when and where there's a meeting. And then maybe the next week a goal would be, okay, I'm going to go, in Western Massachusetts, we have an organization called Climate Action Now that has a lot of places you can plug in with. It's connected to 350.org, which is a, nationwide organization.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm going to get up the courage to ask a friend and see if they'll go with me to a meeting. So it's the little steps are what get us to actually do it, right? And then maybe I would attend the meeting and I would find out, oh wow, they have a committee working on, I know locally there's a group that's working on electric school buses, right? And policies around. So, oh wow, let's say in that scenario, I have kids in the school system. This feels like a place where I really want to be involved in I'm going to go to that subcommittee meeting, and then all of a sudden we're involved in big ways. But I think to jump right to the I'll use me because I'm the case, but to forcing myself to go jump right into some specific thing without like taking the time to research, see where, and just doing those little steps can get us way more likely to do it than if, jumping right in. Again, I'm not a content expert, so I know there are a lot of different places to get involved in policy advocacy related to climate action. And I think, as people apply it, depending on where they're coming from and what they're doing, there are a lot of different ways. And I do feel like that is one of the actions that's so critical to be able to think about changing policies for more broader and rapid systemic change than that just as an individual I could take, which is also important, right? Changing some of my own habits, thinking about my own carbon footprint, Molly. But if I can change the whole school district, it has much, more significant impact.
I love what you said, especially about the fact that researching first, because you will spend time in understanding the issue. We have more people on this planet right now who are talking about climate change, but then they do not have any idea about what climate change is, how the policies work, and maybe they have a good intention at heart, but then they are, I'm sorry to say so, but they are making it more difficult for the actual information to go through because there's so much of false or inaccurate information passing in that way. So getting aware of the situation before pitching in your voice has a very strong like value for me because we need to understand what the issue is and then we go for these maybe not policy like you're saying, we go for these small areas where we can make a change, and that will lead to perhaps a ripple effect in a longer term instead of just blaming that you just changed the entire global policy on this. No, we cannot do that. Nobody can. I mean, like that is difficult to do so. And I mean, like that being able to research it before putting out there, that struck very much with me, because I see that on the platforms here on the internet, everybody is talking about climate change. Many people are taking it into their focus of doing it as a as something to, because everybody is doing it, we shall also do it, and they're jumping in those industries that are working on that for the betterment, but that may be giving out the wrong message. So research is a must, and then policy on your own level to do it will make a better change. That is like a really something which is important for us to understand. Now for the we are quite ahead of our schedule. So the last question I have, which I'll do it in sub parts, is that uh, kindness is something which is very important. So in what ways does Cojourn promote kindness and empathy among its participants, and how do these values contribute to more sustainable world? And
Mm,
this is one part of the question, and the other is the scaling up of Cojourn for global impact. So
mhm.
it can be for to promote kindness, empathy, and all the other goals. So what are your thoughts on that? If you could just.
I love that question. I think the reciprocity of Cojourn, so it's different from like coaching or other relationships where, it's just one person holding the information and one person shares. That each people are come in as in mutuality as equals, and you hold space for each other, and it really can give a chance for reciprocal sharing and learning. And so and when I'm supporting my partner and I see them struggling and I want to support them, right? Or I see them succeeding and I want to celebrate them, that increases an opportunity for empathy, because it strengthens a relationship. And there was a really groundbreaking study that came out of Harvard University that found that having those reciprocal relationships where we show ourselves to people and they show themselves to us in some way is the number one predictor of happiness and well-being in life, more than anything else. And so to have an opportunity to have one more person, right, can really give us a chance to feel empathy for them and their experience. I would argue that inherently, when we know somebody and they know us, can make us kinder toward them and kinder toward ourselves. And I think I talked earlier about the core component of Cojourn, of compassion and self-compassion, and a chance to practice that skill. When I'm being compassionate with myself, it makes me way more likely to be able to be compassionate to others and not come out of judgment and criticism all the time, but also see their humanity, um, and not speak up if things aren't going well, but to do it from a grounding of kindness.
Yes, that is like beautifully you have said that, and also it makes sense to have a one-on-one relationship in that matter, because it's much more easier to connect than if it were a, like say, a four party of Cojourn. If four people were involved in this, then your thoughts would be divided and you would not be so effective that if it's a one-on-one. So I tell about me, and then you tell about yourself, and then we share vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And if I am being hard on myself, you can be positive about it. But if there's a third person or fourth person involved in the same group, there will be divide. So maybe there will be affection towards one participant more than the other, and that will create a sort of a rift. So this Cojourn platform is very well thought out, I would like to say, because it works in that way, and it creates those vulnerabilities in for the positive impact, that is like very important. And yes, kindness and empathy, because the way you are speaking, the way you are understanding, you're holding, you're listening, active listening, because it is very difficult for some of us, even like people who are lonely, they just want to spill their thoughts into the next person without really listening whenever they get a chance. So to sit down and hear for to someone speak about their issues, that is like a great power. And then you learn so much more also, especially for something like Cojourn for climate action. What I found was you can, it is not just the science, but the policies and what other people are doing in different parts of the world, and then you get those ideas. You will not get those information on the news, because news and other things, social media also focuses on certain items. But if you talk to individuals around the world about this, you will hear so many much more information which you would have otherwise skipped if you were a part of this, means like general media, if you would go to. So this has a very important impact, I would say, being a participant myself. And then you have already talked about that this Cojourn is a global platform, which is, it has participants in 48 nations. That is a big deal. And then you may be working on different fields in the coming future. So are there any specific strategies, or is it just what do you will do what you're doing with bringing in more collaborators?
Yeah, I think it's going to be about bringing in more collaborators. We've behind the scenes been trying to get everything organized and ready to be able to scale it more and to be able to hold. We've typically been working more with the organizations that sponsor programs and then participants, but I would love to find a grant or find, some way to have someone sponsor, let's say 1,000 people to do coaching for climate action around the world, and people getting paired and holding, we're still a pretty small organization. And so we are always envisioning, looking for ideas. I think a lot of it is we're doing this pilot and getting the feedback and hearing from people and hearing other people's ideas of how to encourage other people to participate, collecting testimonials from people, because I really think it's one of those things that you have to really experience it to understand the impact. And so it can be hard to get people to agree to sign up to say, oh, I don't have time to do this to meet with a partner, and that feeling can be so real. And then we hear over and over again that's like, no, it's only 30 minutes, and when it happens, all of a sudden it's like that, everything feels possible for a little while, and it helps prioritize and helps give that. And so it's thinking about how to convey the message to people to give it a try.
That is actually correct, and everyone is like need for people sponsoring them, or I mean like people supporting them is something which is important. I hope that in through this event also you can have those like more people look into Cojourn as something which is useful, because we found it like everybody who's working on this pilot program for specifically for climate action, and I'm pretty sure you have these other programs going on, is important itself.
Mm.
So we hope the right people are connected to you through this platform as well. And on that note, I would like to thank you so much for coming to this talk today in our Terra Torrent series. And thank you so much for giving this valuable insight on Cojourn as a platform. And it can be a marvelous tool to be used for climate action, for sustainability, and even I am feeling there is a big scope for this in personal development also, people with mental health issues, and for institutions or corporate companies where there's so much of work stress. Something like this might be a positive impact. I mean, like this might bring in positivity in their life as well. So on
Mm.
that note, I would really like to thank you today, Molly.
Thank you. Such an honor to get to be in conversation with you.